Cheers.
All right, Sam, what is this? The Couchpact. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Couchpact, a Stormlight Archive reread podcast. And joining me for this is going to be my friend Sam.
Hi, everyone. Here on Couchpact, we're going to be rereading every chapter of the Stormlight Archives. Now, I was the first of us to read the Stormlight Archives. So, Jack, do you want to talk a little bit about how I got you into this series that we both enjoy so much?
Yes, so we were shopping for books in Acadia. We were hiking, and I was looking for a specific one that was probably about 300 pages long, big text, and it wasn't there. So Sam's like, "Hey, I've been in love with these books for a really long time. You should pick this one up." And he points at The Way of Kings on the shelf, and it's like facing front cover out, so I don't quite see that it's 1,300 pages long when I pick it up for the first time. But it's like,
is that how long it is?
It's like 1250, 1,300 pages long. And it's the shape of, like, you know, the kind of books that your mom reads because it's tiny with tiny text. And you're like, this is nothing like anything I read in high school. And I was like, absolutely not. I can't do this. I have commitment issues. And it sat on my bookshelf.
But you did buy it.
But I did buy it. I bought it in Maine so it could sit on my bookshelf for probably about a year before I finally read it. And when I did finally read it, I enjoyed it so much that I decided we should sit down and make a podcast about it.
Yeah. It's just, we talk about it all the time, and we were like, we should just be recording this, because why not?
Yeah.
Just for fun.
Because we do talk about it far too much. We have a lot to say.
Yeah.
So
So
start off with a summary?
Well, why don't we start off with what you like about the series and what drew you into it and what kept you reading it?
So I think the very first thing that you really notice, at least me, when I was reading like the intro bits, and before it kind of brings you to you know, like your main protagonist of the story, and you're kind of feeling out like what's going on, the world building is incredible. There's just so many words that are mentioned that you have literally zero context for that make you want to go and find out what they mean. Like, I think in the first two chapters you get like surge binding, and you get sapphire wine, and you get all these fucking like weird words that are, you know what they mean, but you're like, what do they mean in this context? And it just drags you in.
Yeah. For me, what really drew me to the series was, first off, like you said, the world building was kind of the thing that sucked me in immediately. And we should specify here, before we go any further, because I have some things I want to talk about. This is specifically a reread podcast. So we're going to be spoiling the shit out of everything in these books. We're going to be connecting things that we learn about in book 1 to book 4, everything like that. So
do yourself a favor and go read the books, please.
Yeah, if you're here and you haven't read them, please go read them. Don't listen to this. Just go read the books, or listen to them. The audiobooks are incredible too. So
the audiobook performances are honestly what makes half of the story.
That might have been because I listened to them first. That was the first thing I did. I saw them on Audible, and I was like, these books are 45 hours long. This will take me about a month to finish. This is a good spending of my Audible credit. So I'm going to do that. But so what really drew me in, first, like you said, was the world building. Second, the audiobook narration is amazing, and that kept me listening. And then there's two other things that really kept me reading. One, like you said, it's kind of related to the world building, but the way that Brandon Sanderson plants the seeds of magic systems really early on, and then builds on those in ways that make sense. He treats magic in this series more like a science than like your Harry Potter magic or something, where it kind of just does things. There's very specific rules to the magic.
And it is like an element of nature. Like, it is something that has existed for as long as like the laws of the universe.
Yeah, like the Spren are ancient, not much is known about them. And then all of the history of the Radiance has been lost, so no one knows about any of their powers, and they kind of are learning at the same pace as the reader. but they're building up to they build on the rules. Like there's very specific rules to lashings, there's specific rules to surge binding, all of that stuff. So that was the second thing that drew me in. And then the last thing is just the characters are unbelievably good. Like every single character is just so compelling, and he switches around between characters all the time and keeps you interested the whole time. And I don't know how he does it, because he'll balance like 12 characters all at the same time.
One of the things going off of that like especially towards the beginning of the series, because you kind of learn to stop expecting it from him, is that he sets up these things that are like, yeah, I see the trope. Like, I see how this is going to play out. I get the cliche. He sets up the cliche so you can see it, and he goes, but we're not playing with that.
Yeah.
Well, that's been happened. That we've had that too many times. We're going to take this in an entirely new direction with it.
Well, he sets up Kaladin in like the first, and we'll talk about this in the first chapter. When
the first real chapter.
Yeah, the first real chapter. We meet Sen, who is a short-lived protagonist. But we're introduced to him, and through him we meet Kaladin. And Kaladin is shown as this courageous warrior, and he protects his squad. And immediately that whole trope is just destroyed, and Kaladin becomes this really troubled character who's plagued by depression, and it's just really interesting to have the so many of the characters. Sanderson like brings mental health into their characters, and treats it with a lot of respect, and it makes the story really interesting, because you have these characters who are not perfect at all, and he just writes the perfect flawed character. Yeah, real people.
You've got real people dealing with these problems.
Yeah, so I actually had a couple things I wanted to talk about in the preface before we get into the stories, because I read the preface in the books, because I'm rereading them in paper now instead of the audiobook. And in the preface, it talks about how what we know as the Stormlight Archives is kind of like, especially Way of Kings. Way of Kings in particular is like the fourth iteration of the book. It started, he wrote the first attempt at it in 99, was it? Yeah. 99, after Elantris. I don't know.
I thought the first attempt was written before Elantris.
Oh, yeah, it was 92. He wrote it in 92, and he rewrote it in 94.
Okay.
And this kind of like was where he came up with the idea of an assassinated king and his brother. So the king gets assassinated. His brother is trying to grapple with, do I take power here, or do I try to seek vengeance for my brother who was killed? And that's where Dalinar first kind of showed up as a character.
That's the beginning of Dalinar's character.
Yeah. So that was like the first idea.
Before you move on, it's really interesting, like what we were just talking, or what I've just brought up with like the subversion of expectations and cliches, because that idea for Dalinar is kind of a cliche, is like the brother who, when he's put in a position to take power, he's like, do I? And then like, and we won't talk about it too much because it comes back really heavily on as a theme later in the third book, but like that's still there for Dalinar's character, but it is not the driving force of his conflict. Him wanting to take the power that his brother had, that's not the point of it anymore. Right. But it's still like part of the character. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, he definitely, you can tell he refines the book a lot, and he talks about that in the preface. Like I said, he went through that original version was called Dragonsteel. And I believe you can actually, I haven't read it, but I think
you can I know that there's a PDF called Way of Kings Prime available. Yeah,
which I
don't know which iteration that is specifically.
I believe that's the 99 version, but I could be incorrect. Yeah, we're fake fans, as you can see. But in that 99 version, that's when he said Bridge 4 emerged as a concept.
Okay,
which is probably the most compelling part of this book, I think, in my opinion, is all the Bridge 4 stuff.
So really, really quickly, I was reading the text online because I like sitting at my desk and taking notes and stuff. So I was reading a PDF, and the first PDF I pulled open was Way of Kings Prime. I got really confused because the first chapter goes with Dalinar, straight up Dalinar. I don't know, and I almost don't want to say this, but I want to say it's like Dalinar after Gavilar's death. But yeah, it's crazy then going to read the actual book and getting the prelude, the prologue, and then the bit with Sen and Kaladin, and you're kind of like, all of this is new. Like, Way of Kings Prime started after all of this.
Yeah. I want to go back and read Prime at some point just to see how it changed. I think that'd be really interesting. But just going further into the preface, he talks about, so Elantris, which was his first published book, got published in 2005, and he had Dragonsteel finished at that point. And then I think he rewrote it as Way of Kings later. And he had a first version all done, and the publisher was ready to go, I guess, was really? What it was. Yeah, the publisher, they were going to publish it, and he decided not to because he didn't think it was done. And he ended up redoing a lot of the book. Which I just think speaks to, like, I mean, this truly is like, I think he treats this like his best work. And I haven't really read any other Sanderson. Again, fake fan. I really like Stormlight, but I haven't read too many. I haven't read any of his other books. But I plan to. But
you have to.
I know I have
reasons
to.
that we will talk about
I
in
know
the
I have to.
foreseeable future. Actually, this episode we'll talk about it.
Okay.
It's crazy.
So I might be getting stuff. If you haven't read the book, again, go read this series before you listen to this. But if for some reason you're sticking around, I will also be getting stuff spoiled for myself as well, apparently.
Actually, on that note, I know a bunch of, not all probably, but a bunch of the Cosmere connections to Stormlight from the other Cosmere books. So while this is a Stormlight reread podcast, if you are invested in not wanting, say, Mistborn or Warbreaker spoiled for you, it would probably be a good idea to read that as well, because that ties in a lot.
It is funny that I introduced this series to you and you ended up going off on
I am
all of the other stuff before I did.
Insane with it right now. It is all I think about. I mean, Mike just finished the 4th book, right? Our friend who we indoctrinated into the group.
Oh, we've indoctrinated quite a few people into this series.
And he was like, he got on the other night to say that he finished it so we could talk about it. And he was like, yeah, that's what I've been doing for the last 3 hours.
Oh, did you finish it?
Yeah. He was like, I was just sitting on my bed like this, listening to the last 3 hours of the book.
That's awesome.
And I forget why I brought Mike up, but
he might be here at some point. We're planning on having some guests on the podcast, our friends that we've indoctrinated into the series. We've got a few that we're probably going to bring on at some point.
That's just be careful because the Cosmere is very connected.
Yes, that was the point.
Yeah,
right. We got back there. So let's go into the prelude. Or do we want to let's do a short summary of everything that we're going to
talk about in this episode.
So we're going to be going through the prelude, the prologue.
The prelude being told from Kalak's point of view.
Yes.
So the prologue being told from Szeth's point of view.
Yeah. We'll be going through the prelude, prologue, chapter 1, 2, 3, and
Sen's
4 and 5.
Point of view?
No, just 4. I lied. Just 4? No, we're going through 5 too. Yeah. So, all right. Prelude, prologue, 1 through 5. About 100 pages. That's kind of the amount we're aiming to do per episode of this.
Would you like to summarize the prelude, and then I'll take over or summarize the prologue, and then you can kind of...
Yeah. So the prelude is told, as Jack just said, from Kalak's point of view. Who's Kalak? We don't know who Kalak is yet.
No, we don't.
And the short kind of summation of it is...
But he seems important.
Yeah, Kalak does seem important. Kalak is wandering around some battlefield, and he is looking around. There's tons of destruction everywhere, and he's talking about these stone beasts called thunderclasts.
Mm-hmm.
No, he kind of roughly describes what they look like. He says that they look like they've been pulled out of the ground.
Yeah, you get this really like visceral description of stone skeletons that ripped themselves free of the earth or something like that.
Yeah. So Kalak is wandering around this battlefield and he finds
You
Yezrin.
also, sorry,
Okay, go ahead.
you get a little bit like this is what I was talking about earlier with like the hooks, because Kalak's walking around and basically every time Sanderson talks about him turning his head and looking at something new, he's like, oh my god, like over there is where the Thunderclass like ripped themselves out of the ground, and you're like, what the fuck are the Thunderclass? And then he turns his head and he's like, and over there, like the Dustbringers really did their job well. The Surge Binders were, what is a Dustbringer? Who are Surge Binders? And he just keeps going on with that.
Yeah. So Kalak ends up finding Yezrin. We don't know who Yezrin is either. And Yezrin, Yezrin is standing with all these swords in the ground.
7.
9.
There are 7.
Is it 7?
When Kalak walks up, there are 7 in the ground.
I think it's 9. There's 10 of them.
Sam. When Kalak walks up, he still has his sword.
Yeah.
Jezrien still has his sword. There are 7 in the ground.
Oh, math. Right. Okay, there's 7 swords in the ground. we both knew how many there were.
We were just getting a little mixed up on where 2 of those swords were.
Yeah, so he comes up, there's all these swords in the ground. Yezrien explains to him that they are ending the Oath Pact. We don't know what the Oath Pact is.
But it's over.
I think, yeah, it's, as you can see, this is where we got the name for the podcast.
Yeah.
So Yezrien fills in Kalak and says that Talonel, who is also mentioned to be called Talon, was killed and they are abandoning him. And they leave their swords in a circle and they part ways. And that's about all the information we're given. But this might be the best intro to a book I've ever read. It's just so like you were saying, he's just, the description of everything, it just leaves you wanting to know what the hell's going on.
Especially in Way of Kings, especially with this prologue, prelude or whatever, you get nothing. No dots are connected for you for a long time.
And I wrote this down. We don't know what this is until basically book 3, I think.
Book 3 is when you
hints,
can kind of confirm what it was.
Yeah, until then, there's really
there's no answer as to what the hell we read at the beginning of book 1.
There's not. Which is super interesting. Like the fact that, and it's just wild that he waits so long to come back to this, which is why it's so fun rereading this and coming back and being like, wow, this is where we started.
Mm-hmm.
We started here.
Mm-hmm. You start there. As the reread, there are so many cute things that are mentioned between the two that you can do the Leonardo DiCaprio pointing meme to. Like, they mention Braze, not by name, but they mention Braze. Mention the Oath Pact. You get to hear about the Honor Blades. Just all the things. Like, it is so clearly the kind of chapter that was written after the rest of the book, if you know what I mean. As I know exactly how much spice I have to put in this
I don't even
chapter.
know. Maybe this is where he started. Maybe this was he wrote the history of it first and then figured out.
That would be insane. My brain doesn't work like that. I have to imagine he does it the way that I thought, just because of how my brain works.
But, you don't have Brandon Sanderson's brain.
I don't think anyone does. I think we would all be reading a lot more if more people had Sanderson's brain.
And writing a lot more.
Yeah, dude. Buddy writes to take a break from writing.
Yep. So that's where we're left off in the prelude. Just amazing.
Before we move on from the prelude.
Yeah.
Screw the summary, I guess, because we're tackling it as we go. But I do just while it's in my head, it makes me think of Better Call Saul a lot, because I have seen the first couple episodes, right? And the cold open to the first episode of Saul is probably one of the greatest
Oh, in the ice cream shop?
I think it's a Cinnabon.
Oh, it's a Cinnabon,
right? Yeah. It's probably one of the greatest 10 about minutes of television that you could watch as a standalone 10 minutes of television with no context ever, because it's the beginning of the show. You don't have context for it.
That's a very interesting connection that I wouldn't have made, but like it makes a lot of sense.
The beginning of this book would, like, in my opinion, justice would be done to that shot if it gave you the same feeling that you got watching Jimmy in the beginning of Saul at the Cinnabon. Just because, like, and we didn't really touch on how these characters are feeling in the summary, but Kalak is devastated. He is not chilling with what is going on.
That's true. I didn't mention that, but Kalak at this point is really questioning, like, he talks, I completely forgot to mention this too. He talks about them getting sent back.
I have the lines in my head, kind of, not word for word, but he walks up to Jezrien and he's like thinking about Braze. And this is not Kalak's thoughts.
He doesn't mention that though. I don't think. He doesn't say Braze. I think he just says that place.
Yeah, no. They don't say Braze. They just refer to it as a different place. They have to go back. They have to go back somewhere. But Kalak's pondering this as he looks over the battlefield. Sanderson, as the third-person narrator, gives you the little bit of advice that's like, I lived, which is good, because when I die, I go back. But when I live, I have to willingly go back. You get that?
He says it's like easier when you die.
Yeah.
Because then you're just forced to go back. And you're like, what is happening? What is this? So these guys are like, they're dying and they're going somewhere.
And it's bad.
But they have to go there anyway if
they
live.
Gets to Jezrien, who, before Kalak even interacts with Jezrien, is alluded to a king probably 3 or 4 times, the way he stands, the way he looks, how regal he is. And then Jezrien looks at him, and they look into each other's eyes, and Kalak goes, "Oh my God, you're broken too."
Yeah, I had that written down in here.
Yeah,
that's the first thing I wrote down in my notes was, before I wrote anything else, I said, "Almighty above," Kalak thought, "You're broken too, aren't you?" Which is such a good line.
And I love the two, because Kalak, and we don't get a ton of this until later, knowing like their actual characters.
Way later.
But Kalak is like, Kalak is torn because he can't willingly go back, but he also can't walk away. He's stuck in this middle. And then as soon as he realizes, and as soon as Jezrien gives him the out, you know, like he's almost like, oh my God, like I cannot believe it's come to this, but he doesn't fight that out. It's like a line or two of like, what are they gonna do? And Jezrien comes back with his strong. And I'm sorry, is Kalak or is Jezrien the original Windrunner? It's Jezrien, right?
I don't remember. Fake fan.
I think Jezrien's the original Windrunner, which I will do research after the episode and put text on the screen.
I don't blame ourselves too much for forgetting this stuff, because there's so much in these
But
books.
I think Jezrien is the original Windrunner, which just hammers home that point even more, that Jezrien is the one that has to tell Kalak it's time to give up as a Windrunner.
I didn't even think about that. If that's true, if he is the one, that's kind of crazy.
Yeah. And then they put their swords in the ground. So then we hit 9 swords in the ground.
Now we're at 9.
Now we're at 9 swords
7 plus 2 equals 9.
And they walk away in opposite directions. And the one sword that's missing, because there were 10, but there's only 9 in the ground, is
Talonel's.
Talonel, who they left. He died holding some fort. And they all were like, damn it, he always does that.
They also mentioned, which I thought was interesting, that it's rare for 9 of them to survive.
Usually a lot more die.
Usually a lot more of them die, and it just leaves you like you're just thinking, what? How are they dying? And then
coming back, and like, what is going on that causes them to need to do this?
It does set the tone as a very high magic fantasy setting, though, where you have these people that you assume are immortal.
It sets the tone, and then you get no high fantasy magic for, I would dare say, almost the whole book.
Sort of. He like works stuff in with the Spren and stuff. And
I think
and
the
you-
Sprenner is a special case. I would
we
make
also
arguments
have
to
like
Spren.
shard blades and shard plate, and it's stuff that
I
maybe
guess
not
that's-
high fantasy.
I
But
I would have to really look up and see what people consider the line between low and high fantasy, because I would consider Stormlight low fantasy.
I consider it like super high fantasy. So maybe it's like I don't know.
High
You have, like,
fantasy
you have
to
like
me-
gods and stuff. Like
I know, but high fantasy to me is like having like a mage's quarter, and like
Yeah.
half the people on the streets can incinerate you with fireballs and shit like that. I don't know. D&D feels very high fantasy. Stormlight, maybe it's just because of the rule system in Stormlight and the fact that the politics feel so real and that there is such a class disparity and stuff like that it feels a bit lower
I mean,
fantasy.
you do have
but
people literally flying.
I'll give you that.
I think maybe
I think there's an argument to be made that I'm wrong.
maybe it's just that it's I think it's that because he doesn't write the magic in a way that
because
feels
it's kind
like,
of engineering.
it doesn't feel like it's a cure all for everything that happens in the plot. It feels like lower fantasy than it is,
Right.
because
okay.
everything makes sense with the system that he set up. But I mean, and then you think about it, you're like, okay, well, we have people flying, people are
there are
changing
dragons. I know
gravity.
dragons exist.
Yeah, it's
It is. You know what? Great point. Sanderson has the great ability to make you forget that you're reading high fantasy.
yeah, maybe that's just a big compliment to the writing.
Yeah, because you can so. Yeah. All right.
Cool. Should we move on from the prelude? I know we talked about this a lot, but this, like I said, this is
It's such a badass prelude.
it's so good. So anyway, moving on to
I
the
would
prologue.
hold on, really, really,
Okay,
really
one more
quick.
thing.
I want to know if I can pull this out of my ass quick enough to just pop it in there, but I would love to see maybe like I don't know. Maybe like Gary Oldman acting across Hugh Jackman in that Kalak Jezrien scene, you know? Obviously, because we already know that the Netflix talks are and he wants it to be a
There's
TV
like
show.
rumors, I think, at this point.
We know that
I
the
don't know if
TV
there's anything
show
confirmed.
has been talked.
He basically
it exists
mentions-
in the space.
He mentioned in an interview that they were
So
talking with Netflix or something like that.
because
basically.
of that, and because we're thinking about that, clearly I want all the actors to be no names. I want literally nothing to be associated with the faces that they put on screen for all these characters. But because that is not conductive to fan casting, I would like to see Jezrien and Kalak as Gary Oldman and Hugh Jackman acting across from each other, probably. I think that'd kill. Jezrien is Hugh Jackman.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
And then they don't show up for
Yeah, and then they
years.
leave. and then they
They get
go
one
away.
scene. They get them for one scene. Anyway, so that's the prelude, and we talked at length about it, which
Probably a solid 20 minutes
It's-
about the prelude.
which is great. So let's move on to the prologue. The first thing I have written in my notes for this is 4,500 fucking years later.
Yeah,
in all caps.
Okay. Wait, because I definitely wrote that. We get our first death Okay, hold on.
I did write that too. I wrote that down.
But the Szeth chapter starts, and you get your first death rattle.
Is that the when did we get the first one there?
Yes, I believe so. I really doubt that I would have written this if I was wrong, because I read this all in one sitting. I really hope.
You might be right.
So,
Oh yeah, you're right.
we get the first death rattle. We don't know it's a death rattle. It's just creepy
just
text
says
at the top of our
collected on
chapter.
yeah.
This very first death rattle mentions the Everstorm.
Yes.
The very first one. The death rattles, I just want to put this in because I have it in my notes, are probably my favorite epitaphs across the entire book series. Are the death rattles from
Yep.
book 1. Amazing.
Because it works into the story, and you don't realize that it is part of the story.
Then that reveal at the end, that like we're getting ahead of ourselves, but the death rattle reveal in Taravangian.
Yep.
And then we get Szeth.
Yeah.
Son Vallano.
So yeah.
Truthless of Shinovar, my love. I don't think Michael Kramer says that last bit, but I do. um,
So yeah, we have 4,500 years have passed since the prelude, which is
maybe one of the longest time jumps of a cold open ever.
Crazy. It's so, and this
I can think of one longer time jump, and it's Jurassic Park.
Yeah. That one's a little bit longer. So yeah, it's 4,500 years later, and Sanderson has like a lecture series on YouTube that he did at a college.
I watched
for a class, and I've seen a few of them. And one of the things that really resonated, I was watching them just for fun and for I play a little bit of D&D, just for some writing tips, stuff like that. And he's such a good lecturer too. Like he can do everything.
I know. It's kind of annoying. He's one of those lecturers too, and I was watching these before I actually really started reading them. His name was just on the bookshelf, and I saw that he had writing, and I'm something of a writer myself, so I was like, yeah, I'll peek in and see what he has to say. And he's one of those professors that really knows when to hammer home this is what worked for me, but it does not work for everybody. I'm giving you this as a good basis to build off of, but you need to understand if it doesn't work for you to try something new, and that like how I write is not going to be the way that you write. And
he talks about like adding things to a toolkit as a writer, which I'm not really a writer myself, so but it was a really interesting way of approaching it as like building a skill set. And the lecture is good, but the thing that I brought that up for was in that lecture series, he talks about how one of the greatest powers you have as a writer is to at any moment say, and then 1,000 years passed, and then 10,000 years passed.
I remember that line.
And
I do.
That kind of blew my mind because I feel like I haven't really seen books do that. Like he does it here. He does it right here. And he's like, he does this whole story that has characters, and it has like it's a whole scene with a start. It has a start, beginning, or it has a beginning, middle, and end. I feel like
there's almost a logical reason that you don't see that, and it's because what was 4,500 years ago for us? Fucking nothing. We can't civilization doesn't last that long. We have literally not seen it last that long. That is an insane amount of time to skip and then have the same civilization be there. The same species of people. Obviously, I understand how evolution works, but like just saying that like there wasn't some great filter event that wiped them out in 4,500 years, like. I don't know. It's crazy. It's insane.
So he pulls it off so well because you just go into a completely different story from there, which makes sense. And so
the tone changed too.
Yeah. But why don't we do a quick summary of what happens in this chapter? We're introduced to Szeth, son Villano. Who's a great character. Truthless of Shinovar. Gotta add that on.
It was a great
Which we don't know what any of those words mean.
Not a single one of them. I think he spelled Szeth wrong, but other than that, I have no idea what's going on here.
It's like the wrong spelling of Szeth, and that's like the only word that we're like have any context for. We're like, okay, his name's Szeth, I guess.
And then hold on, what's one of the very first lines of that chapter? Szeth, son Villano, wore white on the day that he was to kill a king. What a great fucking hook.
So we get this cold open in the prelude that's amazing, and then we skip 4,500 years
right into the middle of whatever the fuck's going on.
Right into the middle of this, and we get this amazing opening line, and
then probably, dare I say, the greatest 20 pages of magic systems I have no explanation for ever.
But he like does kind of explain them. Anyway,
I know as you're going.
Yeah. So
he handles all the basic ones. This is the best part, Sam, is that somehow he worked Szeth having the Windrunner honor blade. Because our main man, big boy on top, Kaladin Stormblessed, is a Windrunner. So it would only make sense that the first introduction to lashings that we get come from he who is holding the blade, who, is like the original template for Kaladin. It like, I believe George Lucas said it's best because it's like poetry. It rhymes, okay? It's beautiful.
So we're introduced to the Szeths on Sun Volano, Truceless of Shinovar. And yeah, I said in my notes, we get a second most gripping intro to a book ever. And
in the same book.
In the same book, right back to back. And you're thrown into this. And it's told from Szeth's perspective, and like you said, the tone shift is just so good because he really gets into it's third person, but
okay,
the whole writing around him.
Let's
changes.
talk about third person for a second, because I read Hyperion. You had me read Hyperion.
Yeah.
Not going to talk about Hyperion, but Hyperion's a great book. Hyperion brought me back into reading as an adult. I was a huge young adult reader, when you're having to log your minutes from middle school and shit.
Yeah.
Big into reading, would read like 2 or 3 hours before going to sleep every night. Dropped it for however many years. Picked it back up for Hyperion. After Hyperion, I tried to read that, I forget the name of the author right now, but it's the guy who wrote The Martian. Andy Weir?
Yeah.
Andy Weir. I tried to read his, like, Hail Mary thing.
Oh, yeah, you told me about this.
And I just... the first person point of view, like, I felt like I was reading a young adult novel again. And it's not a young adult novel. It's a novel that's at the main table of Barnes and Nobles when it came out. Like, just something about handling a good third person limited, because it is.
Mm-hmm.
Third person limited with as many protagonists as you switch between, as many point of views as you switch between. Like, third person limited is the only way to do it justice, and it's done beautifully. Sorry. Go back to Szeth being told.
So, yeah, we were talking about Szeth. So we get that opening line of Szeth. He's clearly going to kill a king.
Yeah.
We don't know who. That is
not in question.
He's walking through this castle. We get mentions of the Alethi. This is the first time we get mentions of the Alethi.
Actually, hold on. Just because Alethi, 4,500 years later, sorry. Year 1171, 4,500 years after the Prelude. I have this written down. I wonder what was year 1 of the Alethi calendar. Because I don't think that's ever brought up.
It's not explained, I don't think.
I do really wonder what was...
it probably has something to do with, like, Vorin religion.
Do we think it was? No. How long ago was... Not the Last Desolation, not the Shattering of the Oath Pact, because that's what we just read.
Yeah. It's the when the Radiance...
Yeah, how long ago was that? Could that be 1?
Maybe.
Interesting.
Maybe
we'll have to
1.
come back to that.
Yeah, we gotta make a note of that.
I don't have a pencil near me, but
we'll remember.
That would be
we'll remember for sure. We definitely won't forget.
Oh, for sure. We only had to do the intro to this episode about 9 times.
So we couldn't remember 2 sentences. So he's walking through this Alethi castle, and there are Parshendi there, and we learned that he's been sent there by the Parshendi. He's like confused as to why they've assigned him the mission of assassinating the Alethi king.
It is almost immediately brought up that the event is a peace treaty between the Parshendi and the Alethi, and that Szeth is there on behalf of the Parshendi, and that he is confused because they are sending him to kill the king that they are signing the peace treaty with that night.
Yeah.
That is all immediately revealed to us, that there's some fuckery going on in whatever the plots are there right away.
Yeah.
And then again, we don't come back to it for 4 books.
Right.
3 books.
We don't know why until 3 books later.
As Szeth is walking through this intro part, right? he's walking through and surveying the feast hall. Gavilar is mentioned to have already been retired.
Yes. And Dalinar is introduced
Dalinar
as being
Szeth
drunk.
Szeth.
In the
Okay,
feast hall.
so the way that this is written, especially going from the collect prelude with the tonal change, is like you can see, like I can see shot for shot the way Brandon writes, just like how it's gonna play out, and then this massive, like, swelling drone shot as Kalak and Jezreel walk away from each other, and then just hard audio cut into the feast music as the drone kind of fills out, and as soon as the rhythm of the drums take over on
the rhythm of war, you could say,
on that big part of we're in the feast music now, then you get the visual change to Szeth, all in white, bald, big eyes, very short for people he's around, just in the back of the room against a wall watching. And it pans away from Szeth to reveal all the revelry going on around him. And we get to, as it pans away from him, he starts moving, right? And we get to see all the things that he follows by. Like, he notices that Gavilar's not there, but Elhokar still is. So we'll get a shot of Elhokar, who we don't know who he is yet, talking to fucking Nail, who we don't know who he is yet. And I didn't even know it was Nail that he was talking to until this reread.
I didn't know until you just told me.
Until they specifically mention one. There are two people that Gavilar is talking to. I can't tell you off the top of my head who one of them is, but the other one is specifically mentioned to have a crescent-shaped birthmark on his cheek. That's fucking Nail. He was there in the first chapter of the first book, dude. And Elhokar.
Before then, this is the prologue.
This isn't even chapter 1. This isn't even chapter 1 yet, and Nail's shown up talking with Elhokar. Yasna's mentioned to be there. Dalinar. Szeth has to actively avoid Dalinar. He has to step over him because he's drunk at a table.
Yeah.
And like you can see the camera work of Szeth like a ghost moving through this like event that he has no right being in, and you
with
can
like
tell.
all of the important characters in the whole story in the background.
right. All of these. It's beautiful.
Yeah,
it's done so well.
It's so good. So Szeth makes his way through the castle, and he's making his way down a hallway. Starts mentioning like that it's like sinful almost is the way he talks about it, to walk on bare stone as the Alethi do. So it's just more like flavor as to like what's going on in this world that does get expanded on later.
Yep, Szeth gets a lot of interesting flavor right here.
Absolutely.
Yeah. They also talk about, you get a little intro to how Stormlight is used to infuse gems for light.
Yep. Which is then immediately
turned into a weapon.
It turned into a weapon in the next scene, because
before we get to the action, still in Szeth walking around. Sorry, I just have so many little things about this. I believe that this is an interlude for the first book. If it's not, it's an interlude for the second book with Shalash. Shalash or Ash, one of the heralds, has two randos with her. And it's told from the point of view of one of the randos, and they're going around the king's court desecrating pictures of heralds.
Oh,
Szeth notices that Shalash's statue is missing in this intro. Because Shalash is there that night. That's the night that Shalash is there fucking up statues. This is the night that Gavilar gets killed.
Yep.
Another just amazing thing you would never notice, because you have no idea who Shalash is the first time you read that interlude. You've probably heard her name mentioned, but you didn't fucking remember it, because who the hell remembers any of these names right now? And yeah, you go back and you reread it and you're like, holy shit, that bitch was there that night. And she was just ripping stone off of stone while Gavilar was out doing whatever.
So yeah, now we get to the action. So we just saw that Stormlight can get infused into gemstones, which is the first mention of that. Seamless, by the way. Just a couple, like one sentence, and now you know exactly how it works, which is what I'm talking about when I say he just sets up these magic systems so well in a way that's so intuitive, because he explains it really well and he just it's so brief and like you just get it immediately.
All of the lashing descriptions are so visceral too. Like he
Yeah.
really wants you to understand that when you lash yourself to another surface, it reorients your entire perception of direction.
Yeah, you're changing gravity.
And I feel like that falls in so well to how a show would be shot because this chapter is told from Szeth's point of view. You'd mainly be getting camera shots from Szeth's point of view. So as he's, flipping around on walls and stuff, the camera moves with him to really take you out, like the end of Inception almost, right? Where you're like, whoa, okay, like this is weird, and he is insane for being able to do the things that he's doing while constantly shifting his down. You know what I mean?
So, yeah, speaking of that, we get to the action part, and Szeth is confronted by two guards. And I have this written down. There's a really cool interaction where Szeth spots the guards, and they're like, "Stop! What are you doing?" And I think he lashes himself to the ceiling immediately, or it's when he sucks the Stormlight out of the gems. One of the guards goes, "What are you?" And Szeth just goes, "What am I? I'm sorry." And then we immediately cut to Szeth just destroying these guards, and he's lashing them to the ceiling and lashing them like down the hallway. He's dropping them onto their own spears, and it's
that description.
Oh, when the guy
with
like, falls
the first
onto
guy
his spear.
lashed to the roof. So he lashes that first guy to his roof to get him out of the way. Deals with the second guard. And then he just picks the spear up off the ground and holds it like he's at lazy attention as the Stormlight visibly leaks off the man on the ceiling. And he realizes what's happening because it describes his clothes start to fall. His clothes start to fall towards real gravity again. And he sees that his shirt's draping and he starts to panic right before he finally falls. And it's like, he didn't have to do him like that, but he did.
He really didn't have to.
How sorry are you?
You can't be that sorry.
Like, that was a fatality.
He just like did a trick shot.
Like, I was paid like 1 ruby mark a day, and you're over here fucking 360 no-scoping him with his own spear. It's not fair.
Yeah, but great action scene. Very
phenomenal.
Yeah. He continues.
You get an explanation of every lashing.
Yes. Yeah, it's very clear what's going on. He's using the Stormlight to infuse objects and himself with Stormlight to lash them to different surfaces, which basically means he's changing the gravity and forcing them in different directions based on where he lashes them. He talks about the 3 lashing types, right? It's 3.
It's basic, reverse, and full.
Yeah, full lashing.
Basic, full, and reverse. And it's made very clear, especially with this front Szeth bit, that one of the terms that we don't know being ooh shit, do I know the term? Each order has 2 surges. So it's very clear that Szeth has some control over gravity. Gravity is his main thing. He can change the gravity of objects, or he can make objects have gravitational attraction. That is like the main takeaway from his powers.
Yeah, so he explains all that, and he kind of tears his way through the rest of the castle.
And we get a little introduction into shard blades.
Yes, he
coalescing from mist.
So I want to talk about this.
Okay.
Because this is a great scene.
Okay.
So he gets into basically, like, I think it's described as like right outside the king's quarters. Like, he knows where he's going in the castle. He gets there and he sees the king being hurried away with his head kind of covered out a back door or down a hallway or something. And then a shard bearer, which we're introduced to now, steps out of the room that the king came out of. And it has this great description of the shard blade coming out of mist, like you said.
Amazing piece of world building is like you just mentioned, he knows where he's going in the castle. He memorized maps. He specifically touches on the fact that he didn't have enough time to memorize all of the Alethi shard bearers and what their shards looked like.
Yes.
So you get this phenomenal introduction into the fact that it's like, you probably can't read this right away, but there is some sort of caste system going on with the ownership of these.
I was going to mention that too, because one of the earlier in the chapter, when he sees the Parshundi drummers, he talks about how the Alethi see the drum. He was surprised about the drums because he knows the Alethi sees drums as more like a less refined instrument. And it just immediately throws in your face. It's like, oh, okay. So Alethi society is like very, there's a huge hierarchy principle in this, basically. That's a huge part of it. And just gets hammered in again with the shard bearer. There's a lot of nobility. Obviously, we're in a castle. There's a king. But by mentioning all this stuff, it feels like it's just pushed in your face more that it's like which is true. The hierarchy of the Alethi is like a huge driving part of a lot of the.
And it's existed for thousands of years. Like, we skipped 4,500 years of history from the beginning of the book until right now. Sanderson has a ton of world building to make up for in between that time, and I feel like he takes no short swings in making up for that world building. There is an uncountable amount of hints as towards things that have happened in between the time. You know, like all of the things that make a society feel realistic. You get enough breadcrumbs as to be like, damn, there is a lot of society to this society. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's like just the way he introduces all this stuff is so seamless. I just wanted to mention the drummers because I thought it was a really clever.
The drummers is a really good bit, and it also touches on like they mentioned the Alethi, like what you said, having been like probably Szeth's like, I would have thought they were skeptical towards the drums, but once the wine gets flowing heavy enough, no one cares. That's a nice bit to add to.
Yeah, wine's very important in Alethi society. All right, we're back from our piss break. Much needed.
Gotta get all the beer out.
So where were we? Oh, we were talking about
Alethi society, which I want to point out this note that I have, which is tons of mentions of light eyes and dark eyes.
Yes, this is where we start getting that, which again just hammers home the hierarchy caste structure.
What a great racism analogy. It's so easy to understand. It cuts so close to home.
And it's so like...
You can't do anything about it. Like, it's your eye color.
Yeah, it's just nothing.
It literally has no meaning whatsoever. It's like the color of a genome inside your DNA. But it decides...
Yeah.
Well,
it is explained that it's passed down through like family lines and stuff. I don't know if that's explained here, but it is later. Like if your parents are light eyes, you're born to light eyes. Dark eyes, you're born to dark eyes.
Right.
Anyway,
Szeth kills the ceiling guard in an unnecessarily brutal way. Yeah, a little bit.
He went a little overboard, but we'll forgive him because it was cool. It was cool.
It was dope.
So,
he's confused, more confusion from his orders to be seen while killing people.
Yes, that was an important thing I think we skipped over, was
that he was supposed to be visible.
Yes, he's wearing white because it's Parshendi.
An old Parshendi tradition, because if you are going to assassinate someone, you might as well give them the right to see you coming.
Yes. Oh, so we're at the Shard Bearer shows up.
Yes.
So Szeth and the Shard Bearer have their fight.
The king scuttles away.
Yeah. Szeth the whole time is thinking, the king's getting away, I have to get out of this fight. And it's pretty... I mean, we're shown Szeth to be a very capable fighter.
Yeah.
So when he starts fighting the Shardbearer, the Shardbearer's like, it's pretty evenly matched. Like, Szeth is like, he at one point he mentions another bit of world building I like. Szeth mentions that he kind of is hoping that he's like, this might be someone who can kill me.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Yep.
And we're like, wait, what?
Yep. Szeth is super happy to almost be killed.
Yeah. Which is we'll get into that later once Szeth's
reoccurring Szeth theme.
Yeah, well, once Szeth's character's
reintroduced.
Yeah. Once he comes back, we'll talk about that a little more in a later episode. But he has this fight with the Shardbearer, and he's thinking the king's getting away, and he has a chance to run away from the Shardbearer because he like disables the Shardbearer, and he starts leaving, and he's like, "Well, hold on, the king's face was covered, and where would be a safer place for the king than inside?"
It's also one of the things that helps him is that it's known, like well known, that Gavilar is an incredible swordsman.
Yes, he mentions that too. And where would be safer than the king being inside his own armor,
full shard plate?
Yeah. So he turns back to the which he now knows is King Gavilar,
the
Shardbearer, and
badass way, like just in world. Great plan on Gavilar's part.
Amazing,
phenomenal plan.
It just barely didn't work. It almost worked.
Like I love that bit too, where Szeth is thinking about going, and he looks back. He's like, "Why isn't he chasing me?" And that's when he finally gets it.
Yes,
is because Gavilar's not chasing him. Gavilar's giving him that "oh shit, did it work" moment.
Another thing I want to mention, and this is like huge spoilers for, I don't know if it's later on in this book or the next book. The guy pretending to be the king is Sadeas.
Yes.
Which I remembered as I was reading this. I was like, oh,
massive importance is that Sadeas and Dalinar, with everything that we're going to talk about with them in this book coming up, Dalinar was shit-faced during the attempt and success on Gavilar's life, and Sadeas was the decoy who was willing to be unarmored and slaughtered.
Yeah, which Gavilar deals with a lot of guilt from that later.
Dalinar?
Dalinar. Yeah.
Dalinar.
Oh, did I say Gavilar?
Yeah.
Yeah, I meant Dalinar.
Gavilar doesn't deal with a lot after this moment.
No, he does not.
Gavilar's not got a lot more to worry about.
So Szeth turns back.
Szeth uses the entire force of a neutron star to rip the... I'm sorry, I'm getting a little ahead of you.
Yeah, so Szeth basically fights the king out onto a balcony. He like tackles him out onto this balcony, and then he uses a lashing to collapse the balcony. Trickshots the king too, really.
I know, yeah, it's kind of disrespectful when you think about it. He's already assassinating a king in his own castle.
He could have just used a sword. He got through enough of Gavilar's shard plate that he probably could have just killed him like that.
Could have just poked him.
He used to drop him off a building.
We wouldn't have plot if Gavilar got smoke-eyes, though.
That's true.
Gavilar needs dying words. Gavilar, you could say, needs a death rattle for the plot to occur.
Yes. So Szeth is successful in killing Gavilar. He collapses a balcony under him, throws him off a building, essentially.
The plate should have protected him, but he broke a piece of his chest plate earlier during the fight, and while being collapsed on the balcony, a big chunk of wood, Gavilar fell onto like a big thing of wood that went through the exposed part of his chest. Very unlucky.
Yes.
Definitely rolled a nat 1 on that.
So, like I said, Szeth is successful in killing the king then. But before the king dies, he has some dying words. He asked Szeth to write next to him.
Hold on. I have a lot to talk about before you get to him writing. So, Gavilar, a dying man on the ground, looks up at Szeth, this small, bald assassin. He looks at him, and the first words out of his mouth as he's dying are, "You can tell Thydakar he's too late." And Szeth responds with, "I have no idea who that is." Which has no impact the first reading, but on a reread, Thydakar is not mentioned until I want to safely say halfway through book 4 is the next time Thydakar is
You're going to have to remind me who Thydakar is.
Thydakar, big spoilers, warning, is fucking Kelsier, one of the main characters from Mistborn, the leader of the Ghostblood organization, which does not originate on Roshar. It is from the planet that Mistborn is on.
That's wild.
Quick throw ahead. When Shallan finally breaks away from Mraize in book 4 and they're sending the note to Mraize and he's like, and tell Thydakar to stay on his own stupid planet. that's Wit talking to Kelsier from Mistborn, because Wit's been everywhere, and Kelsier is one of the main characters in Mistborn. That's fucking Thydakar.
That's crazy. yeah, I didn't even I don't know enough about the rest of
And that's literally not brought up until book 4 when they start talking about the Ghostbloods for real.
Because I kind of just assumed
it's a throwaway line.
I assumed that Thydakar was another one of the lords that I just didn't know about.
Oh, okay.
Okay. It was another
so
high
then
prince
that goes into Szeth says, I have no idea who that is. Thydakar is mentioned at the end of Words of Radiance as the leader of the Ghostbloods. Okay. This would make sense because Gavilar is a huge part of the Sons of Honor, which is the opposing force to
the
Ghostbloods. And after Szeth says, I have no idea who that is, and Gavilar is kind of sputtling, thinking of who would have tried to assassinate him, before Szeth reveals that it's the Parshendi. First of all, Szeth says, the Parshendi sent me, and Gavilar goes, that makes no sense, which is insane, because, like, buddy. But the next things that he says are, I really didn't think Rastaris or Sadius. And Szeth cuts him off to go, it was the Parshendi. But do you know who Rastaris is off the top of your head?
No.
The fucking guy who convinced Amaram to kill Kaladin's squad for the Shardblade.
Oh.
Also, major player of the Sons of Honor, if not the leaders, because the Sons of Honor are referred to as Rastaris' cronies, but after Gavilar's death. So I'm not sure if Gavilar was the leader of the Sons of Honor before his death.
Before Rastaris.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the Sons of Honor are referred to as Rastaris' cronies. I'm pretty sure, might be mistaking two characters, pretty sure Rastaris is a Storm Warden, because I think Amaram was told by a Storm Warden. Like, I'm thinking that scene where Amaram walks back in, and Kaladin's like, I don't fucking want it. And the Storm Warden's like, Jesus Christ, like, he didn't believe Amaram, that Kaladin didn't want the blade. I remember that vividly, when they walk in, the Storm Warden going, like, holy shit, I didn't believe that, and walks over to the fireplace as Amaram's like, yeah, we're gonna have to fucking kill these kids. Yeah, that's Rastaris.
That's, yeah. This is why it's fun to reread.
I know. I know.
So I do think this is probably, like, if you're gonna reread any book,
one of the most, it's almost like Shutter Island in a way, where with the context the story is entirely different.
Or like The Prestige.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna mention.
Don't spoil The Prestige.
I'm not gonna spoil
because
The Prestige.
That's a fucking movie to watch. But yeah, one of those things where, like, you know, the second dose of it just changes it so deeply.
Yeah. So
move on.
Yeah,
to the writing.
Move on. Okay. Anyway, so the end of the prologue, and this is still the prologue. We haven't even hit chapter 1 yet.
We're at an hour and 10 minutes, by the way.
We can keep going.
I know. I'm just telling you.
Yeah.
Like, I want you to acknowledge the fact that I said we're dealing with the collect bit in Szeth. Like, that's the whole episode, and you're like, no, we can do 100 pages.
You had the 100-page idea. Anyway, we're gonna stick with that because I think this episode might be a little longer than any subsequent episodes we do, because
also the next 3 chapters that we're going to talk about are boring.
Yeah, the next 3 chapters are definitely more of like the start of the book, and it kind of just introducing characters. But we're talking a lot about this intro just because it is probably it's just one of the best intros I've ever read. Like, the prelude into the prologue is just,
yeah.
There's so much in there, especially on reread, that you realize is going on. So getting back to what happens in the prologue. So Szeth, as the king's dying, they have that whole interaction of, is it Thydakar? Is it Rastaris? The king just name drops a bunch of really important people
that we don't know are important until far later.
No clue. He's just rattling off random people. This is why when I read it, I was like, oh, these are just random high princes.
Yeah. Yeah, no, they're incredibly important.
They're incredibly important people. So, as the king's dying, he asks Szeth to get a message to his brother, the drunkard who we met earlier that Szeth stepped over, who really had a chance to stop Szeth because if he wasn't so drunk.
So many people.
Yeah. He says, brother, you must find the most important words a man can say. And I don't really want to touch on that too much right now because I think that's going to be.
Fuck.
Oh, all right.
I was gonna say, what do you think the words are?
Don't they explain it's part of the way of kings? Or no, I was gonna say I think he's talking about
The first
oaths.
ideal.
Yeah.
The first
the
oath.
ideal. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I agree.
I think
I didn't think about that until this reread, but I was like, holy shit, the words are the oath. Like
Yes.
the first universal oath that I can't remember right now.
Yeah.
Journey, strength before honor.
Journey before destination. Or no, it's yeah.
Strength before weakness, journey before destination.
Life before death.
Life before death.
Not maybe in that order. I don't know what order.
Possibly a different order.
But I think that's what he's talking
the
about.
Pottermore test. I'm a light weaver. I make my own truths.
Because we learn later in the book, it might even be in a later book, that Gavilar has been researching
book
the
4.
Radiance. Yeah, it's in book 4. Okay. So we don't
Buddy, we don't revisit Gavilar and his fuckery until book 4.
So Gavilar, on a reread, we know that Gavilar knows everything that's going on, or thinks he does.
And still doesn't understand why the Parshendi would have him killed.
Yes.
Because he's a fucking dumbass.
Yeah, he understands what's going on, but is very stupid still.
And he's such a douche about it, too.
Yeah.
Like, not to get too much into book 4, but it's told entirely from the point of view of Navani. Flashbacks to Gavilar.
Yes.
Terrible husband.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely atrocious, man.
Yeah. So that's where we end the prologue, is Szeth successfully completing his assassination mission. I think we should get right into chapter 1 here.
I want to quickly mention that one of the things that this prologue sets up being a big discourse that I guess doesn't really get touched on as a big discourse, but is mentioned multiple times while they're trying to figure out what the fuck was going on with Gavilar's death, is the fact that Gavilar, to their understanding up until they actually figure out what happened, would have had to been keeping the secret of being able to write for his whole life. And that's a really interesting little tidbit that we kind of just get thrown in there and doesn't really get enunciated on, is that...
Well, Gavilar doesn't write it.
What?
Gavilar doesn't write it.
I know, but remember when everyone's talking about it, they're like,
oh,
Gavilar wrote a message to Dalinar as he died. Gavilar could write.
Right.
That's the whole thing about it.
Yeah. They think he wrote it.
They think Gavilar wrote it.
Yeah. So, moving on to chapter 1, where we're finally in chapter 1, an hour into the podcast. It's just so hard to not talk about the prelude and the prologue. It's so good. So, chapter 1, we're introduced to Sen. First off, is the first character we're introduced to, who's a very long-lived character and is around for the rest of the series, for sure.
Oh, hold on. A note before we move on to chapter 1 is that Gavilar has the Void Sphere on him when Szeth kills him. And Szeth sees the Void Sphere.
Yeah.
And we don't talk about that until the middle of book 4.
Mm-hmm.
Continue.
So back to chapter 1. We're introduced to Sen, like I said. And we start talking about Dark Eyes and Light Eyes again, just hammering more of that home. He talks about how the Light Eyes are all the officers, the Dark Eyes are the foot soldiers, stuff like that.
Briefly mentioned in the Szeth bit that Dark Eyes aren't allowed to carry swords. That the spear is the weapon of the Dark Eyes. Just another little class.
Yeah. So we're also introduced to the sergeant of Kaladin's squad, which we learn quickly. This is Dalit. Yeah.
Dalit.
I think they said Dalit in the audiobook, so I'm saying Dalit. Another long-lived character who enjoys many happy years after this.
Oh yeah.
So, Sen is a very frightened new soldier. I think it mentions he's like 15.
Mm-hmm.
So he's very young. He has an interaction with Dalit where Dalit says, "Pee now." Mm-hmm. Otherwise it'll end up running down the side of your leg when we charge. Mm-hmm. So Sen does piss, which I thought was just a funny scene. And then
very real.
we start we start yeah, definitely. We start hearing about Kaladin. He says Dowlett says, "You're in Kaladin's Stormblast squad. He paid a lot of money to get you here."
Mhm.
And Sen's like, "Why would he pay money to get me here? I've never seen combat before. This doesn't make any sense." Um, and then we're introduced to Kaladin, and Kaladin is shown to be very young to be leading a squad.
Szeth is surprised by his youth. That's one of the first things.
Sen, yeah.
Sen. Sen is surprised by his youth is one of the first things mentioned when Kaladin appears.
Yeah. So, yeah, where were we?
A lot of this intro chapter is backstory given in the context of like it's very clever what's the word for it? Not exploration, but
Exposition.
yeah, a very clever exposition because you're put in the point of view of someone who doesn't know anything. So
Yeah.
he's asking questions. It's like the trick that Doctor Who plays where they need a companion that
Yeah.
doesn't know anything so they can ask questions.
It's an
to the
audience
audience
insert.
Yeah. And one of the main things that is covered in this audience insert while Dalit and Kaladin are talking is that no one knows what's going on. The real fighting happens in the Shattered Plains. They're trying to get to the Shattered Plains to take part in a real war. And the border skirmishes are bullshit.
Yeah, which is what we're in right now. Is
A
a border
border
skirmish between two princes, basically,
Yeah.
vying for
Two
land.
warring high princes of the Alethi kingdom, the kingdom that is currently out at the Shattered Plains waging a war against the people who assassinated their king. While they're doing that, all of the shitty people who had to stay home are fighting each other.
Yeah. It's not a very good first impression
Of the Alethi.
of the Light Eyes of the Alethi.
Yeah.
So
Also, Kaladin fucking hates Light Eyes.
he doesn't right now.
No, it's made clear.
I thought he doesn't, because he has some that he respects, because his whole thing was he's like
He respects Amaram.
he respects Amaram. He thinks he's a
But
good
there's
leader.
that bit with the Light Eyes prancing around on his horse, and he's got a mace. He's got a shard mace.
Yeah.
And Kaladin is just sitting there like seething at him.
Yeah, there's definitely some of that hatred, but not as much as it becomes. For
Yeah.
Kaladin. So we also get a lot of mentions of Spren. I have that in my notes, which is such a unique thing to Stormlight, and I just like, and he kind of just drops it in there, and it just makes it feel like there's so much that even the people that live in this world don't truly understand, which is kind of a huge theme of the book and all of the series. So
I know they like to touch on that a lot with the like everyone understands that Windspren are attracted to wind, but like even Kaladin is like, do this to keep the rot spread away.
yes,
Like they can't quite connect the dots that it's antiseptics causing the rot spren to gather. They still think that the rot spren caused the rot.
Well, I think Kaladin actually mentions in a later book maybe that he knows that
Okay.
it's not that the rot spren are causing the illness like a lot of people assume. It's
Okay.
that they're attracted to
Good touch.
decay or something like that. But it's because Kaladin was raised as a surgeon. which
Mhm. We'll get to.
we'll get to at a much later point. But so all of the men in Kaladin's squad are telling Sen like, no, this is a good place because Kaladin is lucky. Like we have the fewest casualties of any group, and we also have he bribes the other sergeants to take their younger recruits.
Mhm.
And they don't really know why. I think Dalit mentions, I think that it reminds him of someone.
Dallas says like that exact line.
Yes.
I think you all remind him of someone.
Yeah. And then we get into the battle. Kaladin's squad is they run out front of the rest of the army because Kaladin knows that all of the arrows, or the initial volley of arrows, are going to go into where most of the troops are, which is further back, where they're all holding up their shields, and Kaladin's squad's just sprinting out front because they know no arrows are going to fall there.
Mm-hmm.
And Sen's really surprised by this. And then they end up grouping up on like in like a little cove of rocks, I think it's described as.
Like an outcropping.
Yeah. And they kind of just shield up around Sen, and they're just trying to keep him alive, which he's so surprised of.
Mm-hmm.
And
I believe there's a mention of someone getting hurt and like them forming up a ring around them so
yeah,
someone can pop down and field dress them real quick.
Kaladin's basically calling orders by banging on his shield.
Oh yeah, that's a good thing. Is that Kaladin's got a code with his squad with the shield. That real smart. Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Just a great intro.
Yeah. And everything seems to be going pretty well. Sen does get injured, but they save him. And then a shard bearer shows up.
Mm.
And we cut off there. Sen sees the shard bearer, and that's where we cut from chapter 1. And then we end up in chapter 2.
Where does chapter 2 bring us?
Chapter 2 brings us to, I believe it's, what, a year later? Something like that?
Straight into...
Yes, it goes right into this.
Kaladin.
Kaladin is a slave.
Damn.
He is, and where, like, what happened? I was going to say, too, in chapter 1, before we move on too much, it's so weird on reread seeing Kaladin being hopeful. Because you get so used to him in the later books just being, he's just has no hope all the time.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird seeing him being like, yeah, we're going to make it out of this. Like, it's going to be good. It's going to be okay.
Yeah. No, for sure.
So we move on. I think it's about a year has passed. A good chunk of time.
What I wanted to say, actually, because you mentioned the Spren really quick, and we just kind of talked about it. The Spren were the main thing that I talked about to people when I started talking about Stormlight, and I wanted people to look at it. I was like, you got to check it out. It's like this, like, it's almost like, imagine like Game of Thrones-esque level of, like, you know, political intrigue fantasy, but like, the emotions are like these little creatures that they're just used to being around. Like if it's raining, you'll get these rain spren that appear, and they're like little stems that come up and try to catch the rain. And that's always the thing that I would try to like use as a hook for Stormlight, because I think it's just such a unique part of the series.
Yeah. So on to chapter 2. We fast forward. Kaladin is a slave in a caravan. We're introduced to Vlakov, who is the slaver that has bought Kaladin. And Kaladin's being followed by a wind spren, which he remarks is
odd.
Spren don't usually act like that. So I did mention in my notes here, the spren like sticks Kaladin's bowl to his hand. It's a lashing.
One of the first interactions.
It's literally a lashing. And he like describes it as a prank, and it's like, oh, this is Syl doing a lashing.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of cool on reread. You didn't really realize what's going on there, and now we do. Kaladin is kind of thinking about his father, who I think we mentioned at this point is a surgeon or doctor of some sort.
He's a surgeon back in Kaladin's home village of Hearthstone.
Yes.
He raised Kaladin to be a surgeon. A damn good one at that.
The other big thing that happens in this chapter is there's a slave that's sick with, I don't remember what he calls the disease, but it's basically like just a bad cough.
Whooping cough?
No, that's a real thing.
He's got Captain Cripps, my guy.
Captain Cripps.
Like, fuck.
Wrong book. So, there's a slave that's sick, and Kaladin knows that the sickness he has can be cured by just staying hydrated, basically. He knows that from his dad, and he tells Tvlakov this. And Tvlakov responds by taking the slave out of the cage and just killing him on the spot.
Yeah. Pretty instant backhand to Kaladin. It's like when you get involved, people get hurt.
Yeah.
Is the lesson it starts to teach him right away.
Yeah, and that's kind of, he talks about that too, or he thinks about that. And this is also in my notes say, yes, the beginning of Kaladin's suicidal ideations because he has the poison leaves in his pocket that he doesn't really know why he's saving, but he knows they'll kill him.
Right.
He doesn't know if he really is like, maybe I'm going to use them on myself. Maybe I'm going to try to use them on Tvlakov. I don't really know. This becomes a running theme with Kaladin, which I think
possible suicide.
Yeah, it's definitely a touchy subject. And I think Sanderson handles it really well. It could have so easily become kind of a cheap just character trait of Kaladin.
Right.
But he treats it as like kind of central to who he is and like his struggle with mental illness. And I think he is really respectful about it. And it's pretty clear that he did a lot of research, I think, on...
Oh, yeah. Kaladin's got mad PTSD up the ass as a 19-year-old, and it shows. And it's not used as a cheap, my boy is sad trick.
Yeah, it's core to his arc as a character.
Yes.
And I think that's... There's moments where Kaladin is still very brave and heroic, and it's not treated as... I feel like the normal trope in a story like this, with a character that struggles with depression like this, is it's something that they kind of like defeat.
Right.
And it's not that in this story. It's something that Kaladin is like learning how to deal with in a healthy way.
Right.
And I think that was...
He's not overcoming it. He's or maybe not the right word. He's not defeating it. He's overcoming it.
Yeah, he is overcoming it, but in a way that's he's figuring out how to deal with it.
Yeah.
And I think that's very realistic and very respectful of the subject, and I think it's just handled beautifully.
Yeah.
So yeah, basically the ending of this chapter is the slave is killed that Kaladin tries to save, and it just pushes Kaladin further into his depression. So,
yeah.
There's also the mention of Kaladin's brands at this point. The one last kind of important thing I wanted to mention.
He's branded with Shash,
which means dangerous. Right? He's basically marked as a slave that is problematic and tries to escape a lot.
Okay, I might be pulling shit out of my asshole. There's a point in Warbreaker where one of the main characters has to teach another character written language. The character can already speak, so it makes the teaching a little easier. The one letter that is mentioned by name is Shash.
What's a glyph, right?
It's a letter in Warbreaker.
Interesting.
But it's the same spelling. It's Shash. Oh, I'm pretty sure it's Shash.
Maybe not. We'll look into it.
Yeah. But dude, that'd be crazy because that would go on to the that's too far ahead. I'll save that.
Okay. I think we should move on to chapter 2 or chapter 3 rather.
I think we should call it.
No, we can do it. We can push through.
It's an hour and a half.
So. All right. We didn't quite make it through all of the chapters we said we were going to. So right off the bat, we're breaking promises to you guys. So this is a good start.
I mean, the thing that we said is we wanted to talk for about 45 minutes to an hour about 5 chapters or about 100 pages. We didn't hit 5 chapters or 100 pages, but we blew 45 minutes to an hour out of the fucking water.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about. I think we'll probably go through a lot of the other chapters quicker than we went through the prelude and the prologue.
The prelude and the prologue are just very dense.
They're dense, and on reread, there's a lot to discuss.
Yeah.
Because there's connections to the future books.
So many.
Yeah. Anyway, before we log off, I wanted to go... One last thing I wanted to talk about was, did you have a favorite part of what we read so far and a least favorite part? And a least favorite is probably going to be pretty...
My least favorite is everything from Sen's point of view. Because,
interesting. I mean, it's still good, though.
It's good. Just compared to everything else, it's not as good.
Yeah.
It's still good. But definitely my least favorite of everything we talked about. Because like Kaladin being in the slave camp is at least like, okay, Kaladin's the main character. Like this is who we're following now.
Yeah.
Um,
It kind of throws like a red
Sen
herring out
chapter
there.
is just like, what's going on? Like that's the third jump around that you've done in 3 chapters.
Yeah. It kind of throws a red herring because it's like, okay, chapter 1 starts and we're in a new character's perspective. This must be who the series is about.
Right.
And then Sen
Dies.
Not like we don't actually know he dies yet, but
Oh, rip.
He's dead, he's super dead. And then favorite part.
Honestly, probably Szeth at the feast before he breaks away. I just think that as one of the like, because it will be in the first 20 minutes of the show, and as one of
if there's a show,
there will be a show. There's got to be a show. They made there's like a freaking movie coming out about a couple that are falling in love because they're trying to get their dogs to fuck. If that can become a movie, Stormlight definitely deserves to be made a show. But anyways, as a scene that will be playing within the first 20 minutes of a TV show, I feel like that holds immaculate vibes. And the way that I envision the camera work going on in that scene will just enthrall you. It'll pull you in. It'll make you go, what is going on? And that question won't be answered for 268 more hours, but it'll be a damn good answer when it is.
So I got to think about a favorite part for myself.
Least favorite though?
My least favorite, I think, is in chapter 2 when we start following Kaladin as a slave. One thing I noticed going back and reading this, I don't think at this point in the series Sanderson had really decided how he wanted the dialogue to work in these books.
Really?
Because I think Kaladin talks a lot more like, it feels more like medieval fantasy sort of when he's talking there.
And then it breaks away from it and kind of becomes more modern talk.
I think even through, I mean, we'll see on reread, but I think in the rest of this book, it might be kind of the same thing. But once we hit like book 2, book 3, it feels a lot more like kind of just modern. Like he kind of, which I think is good. I think is having these characters talk.
I've never noticed this. I'm interested to look at this.
It might just be something in my head. It might just be this chapter. But I don't know. Just the way Kaladin was talking in that chapter felt a little off to me. So that would probably be my least favorite part.
Okay.
And then favorite part, I think the conversation between Gezrian and I'm already forgetting the name.
Kalak.
Yeah. Just because it throws you into that part of the history of this universe so quickly, and
also for no context for what's going on, the emotions are so understandable and raw in that scene.
Yeah.
You can tell Kalak's broken. You can tell Jezrian's broken, but the kind of broken that he is different from Kalak's.
Yeah.
It's the strong, I know what I'm doing because I've always known what I'm doing kind of broken. Whereas Kalak is like rightfully unsure. It's very raw. It's very well done and it's very short.
Yeah.
So it leaves plenty of room for you to be like, wait, come back.
The other thing I wanted to mention about that that conversation, and just like, I mean, that's probably my favorite part, but one thing I wanted to mention about around then in the prelude, I completely fell for, and I think this is like an intentional red herring, because they mentioned the Thunderclasts later in this, like in like chapter 4 or 5 when we're introduced to Shallan. They start talking about the Voidbringers, and I was just thinking that the Voidbringers were the Thunderclasts. Like there were these big, like I don't know if that was like an intentional, like trying to confuse, or if he was just trying to confuse us in general, and that was one thing that I ended up falling for. But I was imagining So like the reveal of the Voidbringers, which I don't really want to spoil.
No, for sure.
But the reveal of the
We'll leave
Voidbringers
that.
really caught me off guard when I first read it.
I mean, I wasn't even down the Thunderclass route, and it still got me.
Yeah.
I think, personally, the ending of book 1 hits the hardest. Just because you have no idea what he is capable of with the threads that he has laid out throughout the book. When you finally see how he brings them all together that first time, you're like, holy fuck. And then by 2, 3, and 4, you're like, I know what you're doing here, buddy. Like, I expect greatness from you. And he delivers greatness every time. But, like, that first, everything... It's like 6 chapters of revelation straight at the end of this book.
Yeah.
I remember I sat in that chair for 6 hours to listen to the end of this book. Just staring straight ahead.
Yeah. I remember you were like pacing around listening to this book.
Yep.
Anyway, yeah, that was so we got all the way through chapter 2. We're going to cut it there. We'll pick up in the next episode with the next few chapters, starting at chapter 3, where
we'll meet Shallan next time.
Shallan. Yeah. Who's another just brilliant character. One of many in this series.
One of many brilliantly written characters.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for sticking around and listening to us yabba gabba ding dong about the Stormlight.
Yeah. Hopefully someone got some enjoyment out of this episode.
I know I did.
We're mostly just doing this for fun. We're enjoying it. So if we have 1 or 2 people listening to this, probably just be my parents.
And that's good enough for me. Hi, Mr. and Mrs. Dykhoff.
Hi, Mr. and Mrs. Morelli.
All right. See you later, folks.
See you guys.